How are you doing? This is David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave, the founder of the highest paid part-time job in the world, options trading program. And we're not going to talk about options, but we're going to talk about something very, very important for entrepreneurs, and that's going to be funding and make sure that they get properly funded, and also showing people the possibilities of investing as a group. And here today, I have Cherie of the 10K Project, and what we're going to talk about is how to raise 5 million within 48 hours for entrepreneurs. Cherie, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So really quickly, before we get into the video, if anybody wants to reach out to you after this particular broadcast or after this particular production, how can they find you on social media?
So all social media, we're Black 10K Project, and then our website is the10kproject.com, and there's a contact us page if you want to contact us and
Okay,
ask us
okay,
questions. Yeah.
okay. So then what we'll do is let's go ahead and get right into the questions because
Mhm.
I know we've been waiting. So what are some of the obstacles that you see founders face in regards to funding?
Well, there's a lot of obstacles that founders face. So, first of all, let me start off with like the beginning, which is I am a business plan writer. I've been one for over a decade now, and I would have all sorts of people come to me with all sorts of visions for their businesses, and they're looking to raise money either from banks or angel investors. My white and Asian clients would be able to take my business plans and go to the bank or get a group of friends together and raise $600,000 in one night. Like I literally saw that happen. My Black clients, unfortunately, because we didn't have those types of networks where somebody could write you $100,000 check and not be beating down your door the next day asking for their money back, we didn't have that. So, the big obstacle that we as Black people have is a lack of big dollar networks. And I'm not saying that all white people have that as well. I just so happen to find that that was a real struggle with my Black clients. So I wanted to do something to help with that.
Okay, so you said some of the things that you see people funding is some of the access to big dollar networks, right? How would you define like a big dollar network? Is it going to be somebody that's going to be family related? It's going to be somebody that is going to be a member of the community, maybe a member of the church. How would you kind of define not having access to big dollar networks?
Well, a big dollar network is so, for example, one of the clients that I had a group of family and friends. So he was starting in his business. He didn't have a prototype or a beta product or anything like that. He just had this idea and this vision of something he wanted to build. His connections were doctors and entrepreneurs that were making several $1,000,000 a year and were they're called accredited investors. We call them rich folk, right? So they're sitting down, they're talking with each other, and each one of these gentlemen is writing him 25,000 to $100,000 checks. In my opinion, and based on what I've seen, those are big dollar networks for a startup company or a company that is not like a Facebook or something like that, where you know they've already got billions of dollars in the bank.
Okay. And one thing I want to tell the audience really quick is that this is a really, really important topic because a lot of us aspire to be in business.
Mhm.
We aspire to support businesses, and often one of the biggest issues that a lot of businesses have is funding. And
Mhm.
so, because we don't have access to a lot of these big dollar networks, we don't have access to the people. If we look at like a person like what's the guy's name that started Amazon? He was able to go
Jeff
to his family,
Bezos.
Jeff Bezos, and get
Mhm.
like $250,000 from his family, and also get like
Mhm.
50,000 from members of his network.
Mhm.
So why do we think some of
And
these
that was in the 90s.
exactly? So that's a lot more. That's a lot
Mhm.
more money back then than they currently. Even that's a lot of money now. That was a lot more
Yes.
money back then. So
Mhm.
why do we think that we currently have a lot of these funding obstacles?
Well, I think historically, Black people have, just a ton of issues economically with regards to redlining, with regards to, some of the lack of opportunities, with regard to the pay gaps that we've had between us and our counterparts, with the lack of entrepreneurship that we've really seen since integration. There's just been a lot of things that have kind of held us back from being able to really have these groups of networks come together. Now, I because of who I am, I know some people who are high earners, who are Black, who get together and group invest. But if you don't know them, you're not getting in. And how many of us, out of the 20 million adults are out there, how many of us actually know these groups of Black people with big dollars that actively invest in Black owned startups? Not very many.
Okay, okay. So some of these obstacles, or how do you think some of these obstacles, uh, I would say, create challenges for Black businesses? And what do you think could happen if we didn't have some of these obstacles?
Well, I'm going to start off with your second question. So, there was a Morgan Stanley report that said that when our businesses are properly funded, we make just as much money as any other ethnically founded group that's out there.
Okay.
So, funding being an obstacle is the difference between us as a community being able to create jobs, have internships, especially for our Black men that are out there, get more opportunities, get access to bigger government contracts. Erica Williams all the time talks about the trucks and things like that. A lot of times, the lack of startup capital really does affect our ability to do tech projects and all the things that we know creatively we're able to do. We're just not able to get the funding that we need in order to make it happen. Um, and sometimes, even though the topic of tonight is how to raise $5 million in 48 hours, the truth is a lot of us don't need $5 million. For a lot of the businesses that I'm discovering out there, 50,000, 100,000, $250,000 takes them a long way. Because if anything, we are able to do a lot with very little
Okay.
in the community.
And what I wanted to ask you is that we see a lot, especially the past few years on social media. There's been a big narrative for Black people to start businesses.
Hmm.
And one of the things I experienced when I used to do some business consulting is the issues of capitalization of funding.
Hmm.
How come the conversation is not as strong around funding as it is around starting the business? Because a lot of times what we find is that people will start the business, and because they're not properly funded, they can't operate properly, which impacts the ability, one, for the business to survive, but most importantly, for the business to grow. One thing we do in our space, that when we look at a lot of publicly traded companies, and what we
Hmm.
see is that when they're in their scaling, when they're in their growth phase or their scaling phase, they're eating up a lot of capital.
Yeah.
And they're eating up the capital to try to get more market share, to try to scale out, to drive more sales. And without that capital, they can't grow that business.
Hmm.
And so, why do you think that the conversation a lot of times is around, we need to start the business, we need to be entrepreneurs, yada, 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 which I understand. But we also don't add in one of the necessary ingredients in the conversation around making sure that we're properly funded so the businesses can have the ability to survive. Because I
Hmm.
study a lot of publicly traded companies, and I know that once the funding gets pulled from that business based on their model, they won't last long anyway.
Yeah, and that's all businesses across ethnicity. So I'm going to say that it's a little complicated. I think that part of the issue is that it's easier to talk about starting the business than it is to talk about funding the business. Because once I start talking to you about funding the business, you're going to ask me the next question, which is, well, how do I do that?
Mhm.
And if I don't have a good response for you, then you're like, well, then why are you talking to me about that? If you can't point me in the right direction, if you can't tell me where to go, if you don't have access to people or the ability to help me get funded. The second thing is that there is racism within funding. There's a gentleman, Black gentleman, who started Calendly, and a lot of us use
Yeah,
Calendly.
yeah.
But most people don't know that Calendly, first of all, is $1 billion business. And he did not want anyone to know that he, as a Black man, was the founder of that business. He hid it for a long time because if he did not, he would not have gotten there. I won't say he would not have gotten there. He may not have gotten there. I will say it like that. The third thing is that I've spoken with a lot of Black entrepreneurs that have gone into uh, meetings with angel investors, prominent angel investors and venture capitalists, and they have said to these Black entrepreneurs, we've never seen a Black person do this before. We're not going to be the pioneers to try this. Once somebody has done it before, once a Black person has founded a $1 billion company before, then come back and we'll invest in you at that point. The fourth thing that happens, and this is a little bit on our end, is that um, again, we talked about the family and friend round. One of my clients being able to raise $600,000 from his family and friends and start his business, and then go to venture capital and angel groups at that, after that has happened. One of the other things that happens is uh, the investors will say, well, if your family and friends won't invest in you, why should I? Without understanding the cultural issues that your family and friends, it's not that they don't want to invest in you, it's that they can't invest in you. So it's a lot of different issues. It's not one single thing. But I think the biggest issue with your question, my response would be that if we were to talk about funding early enough in the process, if you're doing business consulting and you're talking about funding and you don't have a response for me when I say, well, how do I do it? That's something I can tangibly do,
Mhm.
then, you're going to stop bringing it up over time as a business consultant.
Okay, and let me ask you one question before we move on, because I had
Mhm,
a member of my family that deals with the colleges, and they went to Stanford, and Stanford is known for like a lot of startups. And one thing they
mhm,
noticed is that in a lot of the groups at the school, that our people was a lot of times kept out of the loop.
mhm,
And they felt like, because there's a perception amongst a lot of people to where, okay, if we build a group with XYZ in it, because we don't believe that they will have access to funding, they can't really help this startup.
mhm,
And so, have you seen or experienced that perception amongst startup communities to where, if we're going to start a group of 5 people and
mhm.
we need to go into the networks, the immediate networks of this particular person's family and friends to get funding, we may need to exclude this person because we really don't believe that they would have access to those networks anyway. So then all they're bringing is maybe their technical ability, but they're not bringing access to any capital.
Yeah, so I have not personally seen that, but it wouldn't surprise me. I
Okay.
would say, however, that if you bring the technical ability, I've been within businesses where the tech person, the
Mhm.
person who could code it, pull the product together, all of that, hasn't brought a dime of capital in.
Okay.
So that could also be cultural with a Stanford or an MIT or places like that. Um, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. I know that I was a part of an organization once where, the founder was like, "Hey, bonus stock. We'll give you more stock in this startup if you're able to help us actually get funding for it." So I've seen that as well, and people had to go into their networks and try to find funding for that company. So yeah, but I think that some of the walls are coming down as well with regards to funding and with regards to startups because of what happened with George Floyd last year.
Mhm.
People really began to pay attention to a lot of the inconsistencies in
Okay.
funding, and there's a lot of money now for Black founders as well. So it's still very difficult to get, still very competitive. But we're going to talk a little bit about the 10K project tonight and what we're doing to help solve that issue. But I think that there are other ways outside of family and friend networks in order to be able to actually start raising funds. And the other thing I will say, Dave, is that there are a lot of businesses these days that don't need quarter million anymore to build their first beta tech product as well. So, with a lot of the open source codes that's out there and other types of white label services and things like that, I've known people who have started tech companies, for actually, there's one I'm starting now for $1,900. That would have cost me tens of thousands of dollars, a decade ago. So,
Okay. And this
Okay.
issue of funding, before we go into the 10K project,
Mhm.
how long how long were you aware that this particular type of challenge exists for a lot of Black founders?
So I think I've always been aware, but it's really hit me over the past 5 years.
Mhm.
Because when I first started writing business plans, I literally was just the business plan writer. I didn't really get into the funding side of it too much and like seeing my clients through that piece of it. But once I really got into that about 5 years ago, I really became aware of the inconsistencies. And about 3 years ago, now it's been about four now, I started saying, well, instead of these venture capitalists waiting on the banks and the venture capitalists, why don't Black people start funding ourselves? Um, We Buy Black started really emerging. I started seeing it in my timeline all the time. We were like, let's buy Black, let's invest Black, Small Business Saturday, and Cyber Monday and all of that, where like people are like writing lists of Black owned businesses you could buy from and things like that. And I'm like, well, then why aren't we investing in our own businesses? And that's kind of where the light bulb came on for me.
Okay, okay, I understand
Mhm.
that. And so then what we want to ask you is that, can you explain the 10K project and also give us some more background on why it was created?
Sure. So I'll answer the second question first. I was part of a group around blockchain. We would talk about blockchain all the time. And I had a couple of people come to me asking me about funding for their blockchain projects. And of course, in my business plan life, people were talking to me about funding as well. And I kept saying to this group of people, and I said it for 3 years, I said, if 10,000 of us come together and we each put in just $100, that's $1 million. We can start funding our own businesses and we don't have to wait for angel investors, VCs. We don't have to beg these people to fund us. And for most of us, I'm pretty sure me, $100, like I would forget what I did with $100, right? You go to out to eat or whatever, so it's not like such a big strain for many of us in the community. And someone called me to the carpet, a woman named Tawana, who ended up becoming my co-founder. She called me to the carpet one day when I said it one too many times, and she's like, "When are you going to do something about that? You keep talking about it." And I'm like, "Well, I can't do it alone." So she and three other people became the initial five founders of the 10K project, and our goal is to fund Black-owned businesses. So some businesses, not every business needs $1 million, like I was saying before. Some need 50,000, some need 200,000, and then the law allows you to raise up to $5 million. So, if you don't mind, Dave, I'll just kind of go into all of that as well, so that people will know how
Definitely.
that works. Okay, so in 2012, President Obama signed something called the Jobs Act of 2012. Before he signed that, if you wanted to raise money from people, you needed to raise them from something called accredited investors. These are people who make $200,000 individually, $300,000 as a couple, or has a net worth of over $1 million, not including their primary residence. Okay. So we're going to call those rich people,
Yeah.
right? Even though $200,000 is middle class. We're gonna call them rich for this purpose, right? If those people didn't fit into the rich category, they were called unaccredited investors, and you couldn't really go out and get thousands of them to invest in your business. Well, with that law change, there was something called equity crowdfunding that was created. Crowdfunding is just a whole bunch of people putting money together in a pot in order to help with a specific vision. So, GoFundMe is a great example of that. But before 2012, you could not put your money in a pot in order to buy shares in startup companies or growing companies. Or now we have the ability to buy businesses as well through this crowdfunding, through equity crowdfunding. So Um, the law allows for you to raise anywhere from $10,000 to $5 million through equity crowdfunding. And it is governed by the Securities and Exchange Commission and FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority.
Mhm.
So, from an investor point of view, we get like a little bit more security knowing that the SEC is overseeing these types of investments. But from an entrepreneur, you have the ability to now go and raise $100 from 10,000 people and get your company funded. And you don't have to go and, um, and beg these big angel investors to fund you.
Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Um, mm, so that's basically how the 10K project works
Okay.
is, and we can talk about how it works specifically, but that's how the law works.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know you wanted to ask some other questions as well.
Yes, ma'am. So, and we talk about the 10K project. People may have heard of this particular, I think we said it was 2012 law passed by Obama, the Obama
Hmm.
administration.
Hmm.
What we want to ask is that we've, and especially um, our community may have been exposed to other crowdfunding,
Hmm.
situations or
Hmm.
scenarios. What do you think about the 10K project makes your particular situation different than anything else they may have heard of?
Well, so first of all, crowdfunding is not new in the Black community. If you were born and raised in the Black church, y'all have heard of the Building Fund. Pastor gets up. For those of you who don't know what the building fund is, Pastor gets up on a Sunday. He says, brothers and sisters, we need to raise $10,000 for a new roof. They do a special love offering, the love offering. And all of a sudden, all of the members are putting their little money in, and we've got $10,000, and now we can get the roof fixed. That is crowdfunding, but you didn't own anything with that. GoFundMe is another example. Such and such a person dies, you put your money in for the burial, but you don't own anything from it.
Mhm.
So, what makes the 10K project different is number one, we focus on equity crowdfunding projects, which means that if Dave, for example, says, hey, I am building this company, I'm going to sell shares in this company. And Cherie, if you want to buy a share or multiple shares, it's $1 a share. And I have my $100 and I can buy 100 of Dave's of shares, 100 shares in Dave's startup or growing business. That's what makes this different. This is equity crowdfunding. So, what we do is we get together and we bring three groups of people together. And Dave, if you want, I can show
Definitely. Let me
that,
know.
that graphic. Yeah. So, I'm going to pull it up now. Okay. And let me know when you're able to see it.
Okay, it's up now.
Okay, so what we do is we bring three groups of people together within the 10K project. The first
Okay.
group are entrepreneurs that can raise anywhere from $10,000 to $5 million for their business. The second are everyday people like you and I, we're investors. We have $100 or more. And when we find a business that we like, we're able to invest in that business. And the way that we do it is through something called the Bet on Black pitch, which is actually happening right now. All it is Black Shark Tank, right? Entrepreneur comes in front of the community. Once a week, we have a selected entrepreneur that comes. Tonight's entrepreneur is doing some business in Africa, and they're talking with us about that. But they come, they present their business opportunity to the entire community, and then you, as an individual investor, gets to decide if you want to invest in that business. Oftentimes, the minimum investment is $100. And again, they're raising money in exchange for shares in their company. And then the third group of people, and this is what makes us really different, are our experts. And everyone is an expert in something. So many of the Diamond Day followers are familiar with Erica Williams. And she talks all the time about super teams. We cannot build billion-dollar businesses as individuals, as solopreneurs. It requires teamwork. So oftentimes when these entrepreneurs are raising money, they're going to use it in order to hire people. A couple of weeks ago, we had one of our entrepreneurs come back and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a chief revenue officer. Can you all let the community know that I'm hiring for this?" People hire graphic designers, marketing people, project managers, construction people for retail establishments. You name it, it's being hired. If we're raising money for these entrepreneurs, why wouldn't we ask them and encourage them to come back and circulate the Black dollar longer within the community, to try to hire within the community that funded it? So, this is our ecosystem, and this is ultimately the way that the 10K project works.
Okay, okay. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate the graphic. And
Mhm.
so if I am a founder and I'm thinking about reaching out to the 10K project, what
Mhm.
requirements should I meet before I go ahead and reach out?
So, the first thing is that you want to know as much about equity crowdfunding as possible.
Okay.
And we have a course that's coming out called Road to Crowdfunding. It should be out probably mid April, where we are like educating entrepreneurs about the process of crowdfunding. The second thing is you need to be on an SEC and FINRA approved equity crowdfunding portal, meaning that your campaign needs to be live. So, you can do some research with regards to that, but your campaign will need to be live. And then the third thing is once you have a live campaign, or as you're going through the process, you're able to reach out to us. You can come to the10kproject.com. There is a tab that says Pitch Your Business, and you are able to complete that form. Our team reaches out to you. Tawana interviews you, finds out a little bit more about your business, what you're doing. And then, if you are approved, you can come and you can present your business in front of our group of investors. So, we also encourage entrepreneurs that are looking to raise money to consider being an investor in other people's campaigns, because then you get to see the Bet on Black pitches and you get to see how the process works from an investor point of view. So that way you can understand how to pull your campaign together from the entrepreneur point of view.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. So
Yes.
let's say I'm a founder
Hmm.
and I have an idea, but I don't
Hmm.
have a real business.
Hmm.
Would I be a good fit for the 10K project?
You could be, yeah. You will, by law, need to have an entity structured. You can't be a
Okay,
solopreneur.
okay,
And that's because you're selling shares in your company. So you have to have an entity. But we've had people who have come with just, a product on a napkin.
okay.
Now, you're not going to raise $5 million like that. Most likely, I can never say never, but most likely you need to kind of take it progressively. But we've had people who are just starting out, and I just have an idea, and this is what I want to do.
Okay, let me ask you. So,
Mhm.
and to kind of add on to that question to make sure. So, let's say I got a business and I haven't really. So, let me give this question.
Mhm.
So, we have people that may have a business, and we're not trying to be negative. We're just trying to get an understanding,
Mhm.
and they may have not really figured out their business model,
Mhm.
their how the business actually makes money. They're kind of still in the experimental stage.
Mhm.
Would they be a good candidate for the 10K project? Because one of the things that we see, and I was used to watch Shark Tank back in the day,
Mhm.
is that they spend a lot of time trying to actually figure out, is this business a viable business to attract
Mhm.
capital?
Mhm.
So, does the 10K project have any of those things in place to where um, they're able to kind of vet out what may be the best opportunities, or are they just saying, hey, if you can present and people think that you have a good deal and they're willing to give you capital, it's a go.
So, the way that we work is if you pass through like the vetting process,
Okay.
then you are able to come through and say, look, we're testing a couple of different business models. However, I will say that our investors tend to be pretty savvy. So it is better for you to come in with a revenue model that you have tested
Mhm.
and you have made some money, even if it's $10,000, $20,000 that you've made through that revenue model. And now you want to raise money in order to be able to market it, mass market it, you know?
Okay.
Um, I haven't seen any yet where the person is saying, I have no idea how this is going to make money, or I'm not really sure. I haven't seen it.
Okay. So let me ask you another question. Um, so let's say I'm coming into the 10K project. I want to raise capital. It's almost
Hmm.
like I would be giving up a level of equity. Um,
Hmm.
is a business owner aware of what that means when you allow somebody to have an equity position? So is it a equity position from the standpoint to where you don't have any influence on how the company is run, or is it an equity position to where you can now impact how the business is actually operated?
So, from the entrepreneur point of view, that equity crowdfunding is really great because you get to set your valuation.
Okay.
And we haven't been in a situation yet where anyone has had to give away control or crazy amounts of equity in their business.
Okay.
Yeah. Versus if you were to go to an angel investor or a VC, they may ask for control of your business. They may ask for a board seat, things like that. I know two people who have had their businesses taken
Yeah.
from VCs. So, know what you're signing. But the great thing with equity crowdfunding is it's not like that. You get to say, I'm, kind of like with Shark Tank, I'm giving away 20% of my company for X number of dollars, right? Um, and you do it on a per share basis. And there really isn't any haggling
Okay.
versus Shark Tank. On Shark Tank, obviously they would haggle, but here you don't. Now you do want to have a fair enough valuation where the person feels like it's worth it
Mhm.
to invest in your company. Because remember, your investment is going to be compared to everyone else's investment as well. And if I only have $500 for the month and you're not giving me the best valuation or a fair valuation, I might choose to invest in someone else's company. So you just want to be aware of that as you are thinking about this whole process.
Okay, I'm glad we able to ask these questions because I've seen
Mhm.
scenarios where you can get an equity deal, but they want a percentage of the company equity plus royalty. So what they're
Mhm.
doing is they're taking the revenue from your company, which is what you need, especially in the startup stage,
Mhm.
and they're bleeding that royalty off to pay them back. So you got to kind of understand how to structure it properly,
Yeah.
because what you don't want to do is end up giving up your company, but at the same time, it's something I learned from a guy. It's sometimes better to have a piece, and it's something that Erica talks about a lot. It's sometimes better to have a piece of a watermelon patch and then
Mhm.
have the whole part of a grapefruit.
Right.
Because of the
And that is
watermelon
true.
patch, yeah, as the watermelon patches continue to produce fruit and a yield, if I got a
Mhm.
piece of it, I'm continuing to make money as opposed to having the whole part of a grapefruit. But at the end of the day, you just got one grapefruit. So once you consume it, that's it. So we just want to make sure that people kind of understand the structures of these things.
Mhm.
And so they are comfortable coming in and not thinking like, oh, you're going to take all of my business from me, yada, yada, because I've seen that kind of attitude and it can hurt people because they kind of need that capital to expand and
Mhm.
understanding that you may have to give up some of your ownership to expand and continue to grow this bigger because the goal is to grow a watermelon patch that's going to generate
Mhm.
watermelons every year.
Exactly. I
Man.
will say as well, that, we talked about super teams before. You will want to have equity to give to team members. Suppose you have a chief revenue officer that helps you hit, $1 billion a year. They're not going to do that for just $80,000 in salary, right? And you want to be able to reward that person. You want to be strategic with your equity. But the people that I've seen that have done it best have been generous with the equity for the producers
Mhm.
within the company. So I will give everybody a super, super great resource that was given to me during my blockchain days. And it's actually in our course with regards to Road to Crowdfunding. It is a book called Slicing Pie by Mike Moyer. Have you heard of it, Dave?
I have not heard of that, so it's something I need to look into.
You're going to be blown away by this one.
Yeah.
So, have you ever been in a situation with a company where, let's say, you and a friend agree to start this company? You just agree to split 50-50. And yeah, you might have put in 50% of the money and he put in 50% of the money, but you're doing 100% of the work.
Yeah.
Okay. Slicing pie corrects this. So what it is it says, look, we have this whole pie that's 100% in this startup. And our goal is to grow the startup to $1 billion, right? But we know that there's a certain amount of money that needs to go into getting this startup started. There's a certain amount of time. There's certain number of connections that need to be made. So everything that goes into creating this company has a dollar value, right? And let's say that between now and when the company makes $1 million a year, anything that you do within the company is going to have a dollar value attached to it. So every dollar you spend, every minute you spend has a dollar value attached to it. If somebody comes to the table with a $500,000 contract, they get a dollar amount attached to that. And then at the end of that time period, when you have, let's say, $1 million company, like I said before, all of a sudden that is when the equity is actually calculated and distributed. So if we get started in this business, let's say you and I get started in this business and you do all the work and I put in, yeah, I put in my initial $5,000, but I haven't done anything else, then you get the majority of the equity and I get a little bit because you did all the work to get it to $1 million. Um, this guy, Mike Moyer, wrote this as a way to ensure that all of the entrepreneurs and all of the people that help to get a business started and growing has an equity split that is fair and nobody feels like they got away with bloody murder. And then nobody else, the other person doesn't feel like they got screwed in the end. So I suggest anybody who's starting a business get that book. And there's a workbook, there's a software that goes with it where you can like keep everyone's calculations. And it's, a- um, I've been in business many, many years, and there are very few books that I thoroughly recommend. And like I tell everybody, get this book, and that's one of them.
Okay, and I'm glad you brought up the point of founders giving away equity to the workers
Hmm.
or the employees or the people that are part of the team. Because as a publicly owned company that's in the tech space, I used to do tech for the Defense Department and still do the tech for the Defense Department.
Hmm.
And the one of the I think the CEO, one of the, not I want to say maybe not the founder, but definitely the CEO of the company, he came out on the earnings call and said, well, one of the reasons why we went public is because people that were working for this corporation over the past decade took less than market to work here, but
Hmm.
they had equity. So the reason why we went public is because so they could cash out and become rich or wealthy based on their equity position in the
Hmm.
company. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand that in a lot of the tech spaces, that's definitely how the game is played.
Hmm.
Not every company no won't necessarily reach that finish line, but they're able to bring people in and get them to a lot of times work, sometimes less than market, a lot of times work very, very strenuous hours because
Hmm.
we can get this thing to go public normally between 0 and 10 years. And we go public through the public markets, we IPO, or we do a direct listing, or we do a SPAC.
Hmm.
We're going to
Hmm.
be able to cash out right through the public markets. And so that's one of the things I'm really glad that you brought that up because we're kind of kept out of the funding space. We don't necessarily understand the process to capitalization and also the process to taking something public or
Hmm.
having somebody else exchange places with you to get your position in a particular deal.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad you're able to bring it up because once people kind of understand this a little bit better, they can kind of figure out how they want to position themselves in these type of deals.
Yeah, and I mean, so sometimes people will do that for full-time positions. Sometimes people will do that for part-time positions. Sometimes people will do it for like board positions. I was offered a board position for a company that's in the energy space, and we'll see. But yeah, like it, and 90% of everything that I get is just because I know the right people,
Mhm.
probably closer to 99%. I know the right people. I've been around a long time and people trust me. And, I get so many opportunities. I turn down more opportunities than I could ever take in a lifetime. And some of you are the same way, some of the audience is the same way, where you are, you know, yeah, you have your good job, but to really create wealth, you may not want to start a business, but maybe you instead work as a board of advisor or a board member or something like that for somebody else's business who, is going to get to 300 million in 10 years. And you get a piece of the pie, or you get shares in that company.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. And I'm going to say this before we
Mhm,
move on to the next question. I had done some media buying for a dating app out of San
mhm,
Francisco. And when they wanted to try to bring me on full time, they tried to give me an equity position in the deal.
mhm,
Now, I didn't take it, but that's one of the things that they tried to do to attract me, because it was like, well, we can't necessarily pay you your rate, but we'll give you a piece of the deal.
mhm,
Because what they were trying to do was do media buys on Facebook's in the dating space. Facebook had re-allowed people to do dating apps on their particular platform. And so you are right, in that particular lane, they do a lot of times offer people equity in lieu
mhm,
or in exchange a lot of times for payment, because
mhm,
like I said, it's their cash is very valuable to them. So they want
mhm,
to make sure they keep that inside the company. So they will
mhm.
a lot of times give you equity. You just got to kind of decide if it's really worth your while.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
a lot of that depends on how much you believe in the leadership. If the leadership can get the company to where they say it can go,
Yeah.
then oftentimes the equity is more valuable. But I've also seen a lot of people do splits as well. I want
Mhm.
some cash, and then I want some equity. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, you're right. And it's different when you're dealing with a startup that's like founded by Peter Thiel,
Mhm,
and then he has the networks and the connections to get things through the door.
mhm,
I'll ride with it for 10 years because I know he's gonna figure this thing out because of his
mhm,
networks and his connections. When you
mhm,
got a guy that's just you just know through social media, and
mhm.
he's like, hey, I'll give you a piece of the company. I'm
Yeah,
like, I don't know if I want to, I don't know what the company's actually worth.
yeah.
I don't know your track record, yada, yada, yada. But
Mhm.
you're 100% correct. But sometimes it's even working because I forgot the name, the guy that owns the Dallas Mavericks.
Oh,
He is
Cuban?
Cuban.
Mark Cuban?
Yeah, he used to give equity to his original startup that he sold to Yahoo.
Mhm.
And I don't think he had a long track record of success before that. I may be incorrect. So you never know when you're dealing with these type of scenarios whether or not the leadership, like you said, is very, very important. It can get it to the finish line.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I want to tell founders is that if you're asking people to take equity in your deal, whether they're working in your deal or they're taking equity in your deal to give you capitalization, you have the responsibility of working extremely hard to make
Mhm.
that work, because
Yeah.
they're investing in you and your vision and also investing in your ability to put that work in.
Mhm.
It's not a cakewalk scenario. So I want founders to really understand that if you tell people to invest in what you have, you got to make sure you're taking on the responsibility to do whatever it's going to take legally to try to make that thing work, because they're giving your capital so you can put that so they can put that capital to work. They're not
Mhm.
just giving it to you as a donation. And I think if we
Yeah.
really start to reframe how we see this type of stuff, we could kind of understand the importance of that. There's nothing wrong with supporting somebody because you like what they're doing. When
Mhm.
people are investing in your business to get a stake in it, it's because they want to see that they want to get a return on that.
Right. They
Yes,
do.
ma'am.
And the biggest capital is not my money. It's not the $100. It's my time.
Exactly.
My time is worth more than $100 an hour. So if I agree to give you, um, I don't know, 300 hours over the course of uh, 2 years in
Yeah.
order to help you grow this business, then I expect to see results on your end.
Yeah.
And not, I know that there are a lot of people say, "Oh, if you just try," like, no, I need to see results,
Exactly.
right? We need to see
Exactly.
the ball move in some sort of way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And we
Mhm.
understand that everything's not going to be 100%, but
Yeah.
people are investing in you. Like you said, it's not just a time, because a lot of times people invest and then they will give advisory to that particular situation. They will almost act as a VC. So
Mhm.
it's not that every situation is going to work, but the founders have to make sure that they're taking on that responsibility to do
Mhm.
whatever it's going to take to try to make it work. And I understand that, yeah, if I'm putting my money into a situation, I might not get a return on it. That's why I want to spread
Mhm.
it out. But I want
Mhm.
to make sure that the founders understand that you got to be putting your best foot forward
Yeah.
with that, because people don't invest money to lose money. They invest money to get a return on it.
That's right. So I'll
Yes,
give
ma'am.
you a great example with the 10K project is that I have a list of 50 people that I want the not only to introduce the 10K project to, but I want those people to know the 10K project. Like I want them to like refer us out,
Okay.
right? And one of the ladies is a woman named Kezia Williams. She's got a very big presence on Instagram, and I met her many years ago, but I'm sure she wouldn't remember me now. So when I saw that she is doing a an event in Baltimore a couple of weeks from now, I immediately signed up to go VIP. Why? Because you need to be in the rooms. Again, it's Ericaism, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, I've been living that my whole life. Um, I have gotten on the train to meet with people like, oh, this person is speaking. I need to be in their presence because I'm trying to get XYZ deal with them. That was how I got on MSNBC
Right.
was I took a train ride and $1,000 in order to buy a ticket, get on the train and go and meet this person. And what that person said to me was she had the show called Your Business many years ago. She said, "You'll be surprised how few people ask me to be on my TV show." Gave me her real MSNBC email address, not the Gmail address that, people are like, I'm not interested in you, right? And a few months later, I was on TV. I was like on major, national TV. So when Dave is saying that people like really they're investing in you and they want to see like movement, that's the type of movement that people want to see. And you either posting it on social media like, hey, we're closer to our goal of XYZ. I just came here and I'm standing next to XYZ person and we're having this conversation. If people see that on your social media, they're reading it in your email newsletters, things like that, they're like, oh, that person's a good investment. And then when you go back and you ask them for more money, because usually you're going to need more money if you're growing a big company, they're more likely to give you a second round of investment because they saw that you took the first round of investment and you made something out of it and they could
Okay.
see the progression. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And so you already kind of explained about how the 10K project works. Is there anything else that you want to kind of explain about that we may have missed?
If people want to be investors in
Okay.
businesses, then oftentimes it's as little as $100 to invest in a business. You can come to the10kproject.com as well. Every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, we do something called a Bet on Black pitch. We invite a founder to come and they present their business to us. And then you, as an individual, gets to look at that business, review their business plan, ask that founder questions. And if you like that business, you can invest in that business. And we're investing like the rich do. So if you're familiar with family offices, part of their investment, about 22% of their investment is private equity, right? And this is, we cannot guarantee a return on investment. However, um, angel investors that build a portfolio of at least 50 companies, they tend to do pretty well. And, 10K project's going to be around for years. If it takes 5, 10 years for you to build that portfolio, it's no problem with regards to that, but you can be an investor, you can be an expert, or you can be an entrepreneur raising money, or you could do all three.
Okay. Okay. And then also want to ask you, is there a space in the 10K project for a person who works, however, they still desire to invest? So they don't want to be the business
Mhm.
owner, but they still want to be, involved in some of these projects.
Yeah, so being an investor is a great way to do it. We have a lot of people who work Fortune 500 jobs and they just want to be an investor. We have people who work Fortune 500 jobs and they're an investor, but they're also an expert helping the entrepreneur, with what they need in order to grow their businesses. I believe that we'll have a network where, let's say you're an entrepreneur, you're able to reach out to us and say, hey, I've been trying to get this contract with Marriott or with the New York Jets or whatever. Hey, is there somebody out there who can help me get in the door? And we, as a people, we have so much when we come together and we work together. We not may not be able to be 6 people at a dinner table and raise 600,000, but we can be 10,000 people raising $600,000 for a company and help you get into whatever door you need to get into in order to build a multi-million dollar company. And I truly believe that. I truly believe that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. And so I wanted to kind of ask the audience, if you have any questions, put them in the actual chat. We'll go ahead and try to do some questions real quick before we get out of here. We're at the 50-minute mark. And Sharia, I really appreciate you coming on because, like I said before, is that we have a lot of conversations, especially online, about
Mhm,
doing for self-starting businesses, things of that
mhm,
nature. But we
mhm,
leave out the funding aspect. And one of the things that
mhm,
I dealt with as a media buyer is that businesses would come to me and I would kind of lay out what it was going to cost for them to do media buys. And
mhm,
we would find out really quickly that they didn't have the capital. And they
mhm,
also didn't know who to go to because a lot of times they spent all their money just trying to get the business off the ground.
mhm,
Or maybe they should have maybe thought about funding before they had even really got down the road with the business. So a lot of times
mhm,
you get a little too invested and you realize I don't necessarily have the capital, but then you
mhm.
don't want to quit because you pretty much already spent everything just trying to get it off the ground. And I
Right.
think this is a really, really important conversation because we don't really bring the capitalization or the funding into this particular conversation. And it's really the backbone of a lot of these businesses that we look up to and don't realize they have capital. I mean, I read 10Ks, I read annual reports all the time. One of the things they talk about is their access to get capital, the access to get
Mhm,
lines of credit, how much that's going to cost them, how much debt they took on, how much debt they've taken on to get capitalization. And it's something that we leave out. And many of these businesses that we utilize on a day-to-day basis, they wouldn't operate without that capital. So
mhm.
here's one question I want to ask the audience again. If you got any questions, put it in the chat before we get out of here. And she says, has there been a review of the cooperative collective business model for the Afrocentric community where business co-ownership equitable partners? I'm not 100%.
There hasn't been for us. We
Okay.
focus on equity crowdfunding. So, I know that there are co-ops that are out there. I know Lamar Wilson, for example, is somebody who has a co-op. There are other people that do that. There are people that do susus and all of that stuff. But what we like, so the co-ops, I think, are based on state law,
Mhm.
whereas equity crowdfunding is governed by the SEC and FINRA, so that's federal law. Um, but Lisa, they are out there.
Okay. Okay. And that seems to be the only question. So I'm not going to
Okay.
let me see. Okay, so I'm not going to hold you. So I want to ask
Okay.
you, in wrapping up, is there anything that you want to give our audience before you get out of here?
Just come and visit us at the10kproject.com. You can also come to our YouTube channel at Black 10K Project. Every Monday, we come on with a different expert who talks about investing, or talks about growing businesses, starting businesses, etc. So definitely come over there and join us. And if you believe in the power of group economics and community, as well as growing wealth for yourself and your family, then I think that the 10K Project is a great place for you to consider being able to do that with small dollars, with as little as $100.
Okay, okay. All right, so I appreciate everybody coming through. I want to ask everybody watching the show to share this out to your friends and family, especially people that you know that are entrepreneurship minded, they're business minded, and they may be kind of asking how they can get their business funded because we definitely have a solution for them. This is going to be
Mhm.
David Williams, also known as Diamond Dave, Cherie with the 10K Project. We'll talk to y'all later.